You're at a party, holding a drink, trying to look comfortable.
5 minutes ago, you were introduced to someone.
Now, you see them walking back towards you, a friendly smile on their face.
Your heart does a little flip.
On the outside, you're smiling back.
But inside, your brain is a blank screen.
The name was there. You heard it. And now it has completely vanished. They're about to speak, and as the panic rises, your mind scrambles, abandoning the search for the name and switching to a more urgent protocol: the art of avoidance. Suddenly, you're an expert in linguistic misdirection. A quick, "Hey man," or an overly enthusiastic, "So good to see you," becomes your shield. You might even find yourself laughing just a little too hard at their joke, hoping the warmth can substitute for their name. All the while, a silent prayer is running on a loop. Please let someone else walk up and say it. And when the moment passes, that familiar sinking feeling often kicks in. Am I just rude? But before you label yourself as bad with names, let me offer a reframe. That momentary blank isn't a sign of disrespect, and it is not a personal failing. It's a symptom of a much deeper, more interesting process. The truth is, the reason that name vanishes is a fascinating quirk in your brain's unique architecture. There's something very specific happening in that split second, and it has everything to do with how your mind is forced to triage an overwhelming flood of information. Think of what's actually happening in that moment of introduction. Your brain isn't just passively receiving one piece of information. It's performing a high-speed social scan, running a dozen complex assessments at once. It's analyzing their facial expressions for warmth, their tone for sincerity, their body language for openness. At the same time, it's managing your own internal state, your posture, what you'll say next, whether you seem friendly. It's a cognitive flood. In this deluge of rich human data, your brain acts like an emergency room doctor. It performs triage. And a name, a string of sounds with no initial meaning, is often the first thing to be left in the waiting room. The problem isn't your long-term memory. That part of your brain works fine. The issue is the tiny, fragile bridge leading to it. This space is called your working memory, and it has a notoriously small capacity. An abstract piece of data, an arbitrary sound like Sarah, often gets crowded out before it can even make the journey across. Psychologists have a specific name for this mental traffic jam. It's called the next-in-line effect. First detailed in a 1973 study by Malcolm Brenner, it describes a fascinating quirk in our attentional architecture. When your brain anticipates that it's your turn to speak, its focus doesn't point outward, it turns inward. It starts rehearsing your lines, managing your anxiety, and preparing your introduction. The classic experiment that revealed this is elegantly simple in its design. Participants in a group were asked to introduce themselves one by one. The results were startlingly consistent. People almost always forgot the name of the person who spoke immediately before them. Their minds weren't focused on listening. They were preoccupied with rehearsing their own introduction. But this isn't a simple lapse in memory. The name wasn't forgotten because, from a cognitive standpoint, it was never really there to begin with. Here's why that distinction is so important. This is what psychologists call an encoding failure. Your brain's attention, hijacked by the next-in-line effect, was so focused on preparing your own introduction that it simply didn't save the file. The sound of their name arrived, but because your cognitive resources were pointed inward, it was left rootless, unable to anchor itself. To make this perfectly clear, let's imagine your working memory in a very specific place. Imagine your working memory is that gray plastic tray at airport security. It's shallow, and it can only hold a few items at once. As you meet someone, you're loading it up with urgent tasks. Make good eye contact. Smile, but not too wide. What will I say next? The tray is already full with the intense job of managing your own social performance. Then they offer their name. It's one last item placed on the teetering pile. As the conversation moves forward, something has to give. And that new abstract piece of data is the first thing to slide off unnoticed. It never even made it to the scanner for processing. But that overloaded tray only explains the mechanics. It doesn't explain why it was so full to begin with. Because the next in line effect is often just one part of a much bigger story. Because the real reason that tray is full has less to do with who you're meeting and more to do with the constant running commentary inside your own mind. For many of us, especially those prone to a bit of social anxiety, that running commentary is almost deafening. It's a constant, high-speed stream of self-evaluation. Am I making a good impression? Did that joke land right? I hope I don't seem awkward. This isn't arrogance or self-absorption. It's the exact opposite. It's a form of intense self-monitoring, where your own performance becomes the loudest thing in the room. Every bit of mental bandwidth dedicated to this internal audit is bandwidth that simply isn't available to encode external data, like a name. This isn't just a theory. It's a well-documented cognitive trade-off. Studies in social psychology confirm a direct link. The higher your self-focused attention, the poorer your recall of external details, like a name. Your brain is so occupied acting as your own internal performance coach that it simply doesn't have the resources left to also be an objective observer. It becomes a zero-sum game, where your attention has to choose where to point. Think of your attention as a single, powerful spotlight. You can point it outward, fully illuminating the person in front of you, their face, their story, their name. Or you can point it inward, casting a bright light on your own feelings of anxiety and self-consciousness. The fundamental architecture of our focus means you can't truly illuminate both at once. And that forces a subconscious choice. But what if forgetting a name isn't a sign you're making the wrong choice? So here's the reframe. It's not that you're bad with names. It's that your brain is good with people. It's prioritizing the emotional data, the texture of the connection, over the administrative data. But of course, that reframe only works for you. From an evolutionary perspective, your brain is running a far more ancient program. It's asking the crucial questions. Is this person a threat? What are they feeling? How can I build rapport? These are complex human calculations for survival and social bonding. A name is just administrative data. In that moment, your brain isn't being rude. It's being deeply human, choosing the texture of connection over a simple label. But does that choice feel human to the person on the other side of it? Okay, but let's be honest. The person whose name you forgot doesn't care about your cognitive architecture. They just feel insignificant, and that feeling is completely valid. The impact is real, even if the intent wasn't malicious. But here's the crucial part. The name was forgotten, not the person. You likely remember the story they told about their sister, the specific way they laughed, their passionate take on a book you both love. This distinction is what separates a cognitive quirk from a personal slight. And it challenges the popular myth that some people are just born good with names. This myth treats the brain like a computer's hard drive, as if some people are just born with more storage space. But it's not about capacity, it's about strategy. Those who seem good with names have simply developed a system to flag that specific data as important, which begs the question, what data is your brain prioritizing instead? Think about what you did retain. You remember the feeling they gave you. You remember the way their eyes lit up when they talked about their passion. You remember the unique texture of the conversation. Your brain didn't fail. It succeeded at a different, more human task. It captured the person, not the administrative data assigned to them. And isn't that a more meaningful form of memory? This tendency to prioritize the human element over the label might actually be a marker for something else entirely. It's the mark of a highly empathetic or socially conscious mind. Your brain is so deeply engaged in the act of understanding, of mapping the emotional terrain of the person in front of you, that their name simply becomes irrelevant administrative data. It's a different kind of intelligence, one that prioritizes the texture of connection over the label. But like any specialized architecture, this profound focus on the human element comes with a very specific kind of trade-off. The cost is obvious. That brief, awkward moment of social friction when you stumble for their name. But the benefit is often invisible and immense. It's a heightened sensitivity to the emotional texture of the conversation. It's an intuitive grasp of who this person is beyond their label. Your brain is operating like a social artist, not a data entry clerk. Many would argue that's a worthwhile trade. But what if you want to help your brain do both, to hold on to the name without sacrificing that deeper connection? So accepting this about your brain's architecture isn't about resignation. It's about working with it, not against it. There are a few simple, compassionate ways to consciously flag a name as important, nudging it from that overloaded tray into a safer place. First, for the first 5 seconds of meeting someone, make the conscious choice to point your attentional spotlight entirely outward. Decide to listen, not to rehearse. "It's great to meet you, Sarah," forces your brain to treat the name not as passive data, but as an active tool for connection. This helps move it from that overloaded security tray into your carry-on. But these are strategies for the next time. They don't erase the feeling that's already there, that wave of shame that hits you when you blank. So the next time that feeling washes over you, stop. That feeling is not evidence of a flaw. It's not proof you're disrespectful. Recognize it for what it truly is, the sensation of your brain doing its complex, human-centric job. It's the feeling of a mind prioritizing the texture of a person over their label. This isn't a moral failing. It's a cognitive signature, and understanding what that signature truly says about you is the final step. You are not rude. You are not forgetful. You are simply running a different program, one that prioritizes human connection. You remember the feeling, the story, the warmth. The name was always the least interesting part of them, the single data point your brain chose to sacrifice. Give yourself the compassion you would give a friend. This mental architecture is not a moral failing. It just forces us to ask what it is we truly choose to remember about one another. If you could only keep one memory of a person, their name, or how they made you feel, which one holds the true texture of who they are? The label is just data. The feeling? That part is still there. Perhaps our brains have already made that choice for us. After seeing how our brains sacrifice data for connection, think of one person you admire. What specific feeling comes to mind before their name does? Tell me in the comments below. I truly want to know. This is just one cognitive pattern. But what if past adversity installed a much deeper one, a rare form of intelligence? That's our next video. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't lose the path. Like this if you understand the feeling, and share it with someone who needs this compassion.